On the night of October 14th, deep inside a remote canyon system known as Black Ridge Gorge, a search and rescue helicopter spotted something unusual on the thermal camera. A faint, flickering heat signature. Barely human. Barely alive. When the team descended, they found a man lying motionless in the sand, so dehydrated his skin had begun peeling from his lips. He was covered in soot, his clothes torn, and his palms shredded as though he'd been clawing at stone for hours. His first words, spoken in a hoarse whisper, were, "Don't go in the tunnel. It's still breathing." This is the story of how one hiker survived 72 hours trapped in one of the most hostile places in North America. Black Ridge Gorge is located in a sparsely mapped desert region, notorious for hidden slot canyons, flash floods, and narrow underground tunnels carved by centuries of erosion. Only 2 known paths lead in. There are 0 marked paths leading out. The National Park Service repeatedly warns visitors to stay away, but that didn't stop Evan Mercer, a 32-year-old outdoor photographer who had been building a portfolio of remote landscapes. On October 11th, he entered Black Ridge Gorge alone. He would not emerge for 3 days. Evan arrived at the mouth of the gorge shortly after sunrise. The entrance was a towering sandstone corridor that narrowed down until the sky became a thin blue ribbon overhead. The air inside the gorge was several degrees cooler, and the walls sloped downward at a subtle but steady angle. He documented everything. The colors of the rock layers, the way the light broke along the canyon curves, the echo of every footstep. At 9:42 a.m., his camera captured something important. A small opening in the canyon wall. A slit barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. According to his later statement, he only intended to look inside for a moment. But curiosity, as it often does in survival stories, became his first mistake. The slit opened into a vast underground chamber, its ceiling so high his flashlight couldn't reach it. A natural tunnel extended deeper into the rock. Evan paused at the entrance, feeling cold air pushing outward, as if the tunnel itself exhaled. He took a step inside, and then another, and then the ground shifted. The sand beneath him collapsed, dropping him nearly 10 feet onto jagged stone. His flashlight cracked, his phone screen shattered. His backpack snapped open and slid into a narrow crevice. When he sat up, dust swirling around him, he realized something terrifying. The entrance he came through. It was now completely sealed by fallen sand and rock. He was underground, alone, injured, and with only a half-working flashlight. His left leg throbbed sharply. Later scans showed he had fractured his fibula during the fall. But in that moment, Evan forced himself up. He checked his water, 1 bottle, his food, 2 protein bars, his battery, 46%. And the tunnel behind him? Pitch black. Evan moved slowly, dragging his injured leg along the uneven floor. The narrow passage widened and constricted in unpredictable patterns, forcing him at times to crawl, at times to shuffle sideways. He marked his path with chalk, a safeguard all experienced cavers use. But he would soon run out, and deeper in, the chalk marks would begin disappearing. The tunnel branched in multiple directions, and he chose the path where he felt the faintest breeze, assuming it might lead upward. Hours passed, his flashlight dimmed, the air grew colder, and the breeze he was following, it stopped. That's when he heard it, a distant thumping, rhythmic, like water dripping deep inside the stone. Except it wasn't water. The sound was too steady, too patterned, almost like breathing. He called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" His voice echoed endlessly into the chambers beyond. No answer. Just that hollow, pulsing thump. He turned back the way he came. But something was wrong. The chalk marks he left earlier were gone. By 10 p.m., Evan's flashlight was a faint yellow glow. He rationed the battery by using it only for quick bursts, walking blind in between. He found a narrow ledge and sat down to rest. He tried recording a message on his camera, but the device wouldn't power on. In complete darkness, he began hearing things. The scrape of shifting pebbles, the flutter of unseen drafts. A sound like whispering carried along the walls. He told rescuers later, "It felt like the cave knew I was there." Sleep never came, only shivering, fear, and the constant sensation that something was moving just beyond the edge of his perception. The next morning, or what he guessed was morning, he forced himself to continue. That's when he reached the underground river. A shallow ribbon of water flowed across the stone floor, carving a smooth channel that disappeared beneath a low archway. The arch was barely 30 inches tall, a crawl space, but water meant hydration. He drank cautiously, filtering it through a cloth. This bought him time, but the river also meant danger. Underground waterways are often part of flash flood systems. If it rained anywhere upstream, the water level could rise instantly, turning the tunnel into a death trap. Still, it was the only direction that continued upward, so he crawled. The stone scraped his back, his injured leg dragged behind him. The floor grew wetter, and halfway through, he saw something ahead, a backpack. It wasn't his. The pack was wedged between two rocks as if placed intentionally. Dust covered it, but the fabric remained intact. Inside, he found a rusted canteen, a dead flashlight, a torn map with half the ink smeared away, a notebook sealed in a plastic sleeve. The notebook contained only 4 pages, all water damaged. But on the last page, written shakily, were 3 words: "Don't go down." Nothing else. No name. No date. Evan shoved the notebook into his shirt and continued forward. That night, the darkness felt heavier. The tunnel carried a low-frequency hum, almost mechanical, though no man-made equipment had ever been installed in the gorge. The hum caused the stone beneath him to vibrate, and at times he thought he could feel faint air pulses moving through the narrow spaces. He tried to convince himself it was water, wind, or shifting pressure, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the sound resembled breathing. At one point, a rock fell behind him with a loud crack, echoing so violently he felt it in his rib cage. He spun around, shining his dim light backwards, but nothing was there, just the long, empty corridor stretching into oblivion. He didn't sleep. By what he thought was the 3rd day, Evan had begun hallucinating from exhaustion. But when he turned a corner, he found something very real. A massive underground cavern, easily the size of a stadium. Stalactites hung like jagged teeth overhead. Sand covered the floor in unnatural patterns, rippled like waves frozen in time. At the far end of the chamber stood a stone archway leading upward. A way out. He limped toward it, but then he stopped abruptly, because across the sand he saw drag marks, wide sweeping trails, as though something large had been pulled, or crawled, toward the exit. The sand was still disturbed, recent. He felt a surge of adrenaline and moved faster than he had in hours. Behind him, the humming rose to a deep, resonant throb. The sand vibrated under his feet, and somewhere inside the darkness of the chamber, something shifted. He did not look back. The tunnel upward was steep and uneven, forcing him to climb using both hands. His palms tore open on the jagged stone. Sweat stung his eyes. Every breath echoed painfully inside the tight walls. The humming grew distant, but never fully disappeared. At one point, the tunnel narrowed so sharply he had to turn his head sideways just to fit. The air smelled damp, metallic, and hot, almost like the inside of a furnace. Evan later said the walls felt warm to the touch, as if something deeper inside the rock was generating heat. Finally, after an hour of crawling and climbing, he saw light. Not daylight, but a faint, bluish glow. An exit. The tunnel opened into a tall, vertical crevasse, illuminated by bioluminescent minerals. The glow was dim but beautiful, painting the rock walls with shifting blue patterns. A narrow ledge followed the crevasse upward toward a thin sliver of daylight. He climbed carefully, but his injured leg shook violently with every step. Halfway up, the rock beneath his foot crumbled. He slipped. He fell backward and barely managed to grab a protruding branch of stone. The impact dislocated his shoulder. He screamed, but he did not let go. Gritting his teeth, he hauled himself back onto the ledge, using only one arm, and continued upward. Behind him, deep in the tunnel, the humming surged again. At the top of the crevasse, sunlight poured through a fissure just large enough for him to squeeze through. He used his good arm to push aside rocks, creating a small gap. Warm air hit his face. The first fresh air in nearly 72 hours. He clawed at the stone relentlessly, his nails bending backward, blood smearing across the rocks. He screamed through the pain, driven by pure survival instinct. The humming roared from below, reverberating through the walls. He didn't look back, not once. Finally, his body slid through the opening and spilled onto sand. Daylight blinded him. He was out. He dragged himself a few feet from the crack before collapsing. His throat was so dry he couldn't call for help. He faded in and out of consciousness for hours until, by sheer luck, a passing reconnaissance helicopter scanning the canyon picked up his thermal signature. When rescuers reached him, they found his body temperature dangerously low, his skin sunburned from sudden exposure, and his muscles failing from starvation. But he was alive. As medics lifted him onto the stretcher, the team leader noticed something odd. The fissure Evan had crawled through was now sealed. Fresh rockfall, natural collapse, or something else. No one could say. Later, in the hospital, Evan gave rangers the notebook he'd found in the tunnel. Only 2 pages were still legible. Both contained frantic scribbles, but a repeated phrase appeared on the final line. It moves when the light goes out. Search and rescue teams explored the first chamber, but reported nothing unusual. No tunnels matching his description, no underground river, no chamber with sand ripples, and certainly no cavern with glowing mineral walls. In official reports, the area he emerged from is labeled unstable geology, access impossible. To this day, Evan refuses to hike or explore caves again. He avoids dark rooms, avoids confined spaces, and sometimes, late at night, he claims he can still feel faint vibrations in the floorboards, as if something far below the surface of the earth is still breathing. His final interview ended with one sentence: Black Ridge Gorge doesn't trap people, it waits for them.